The moment I watched Brenda Wallace pull her white Lexus up to my driveway at 7 in the morning, still wearing her leopard print coat and holding that damned clipboard, I knew my quiet Tuesday was about to go straight to hell. I had been living in Meadowbrook Heights, Colorado for 3 years now, a supposedly peaceful subdivision about 20 minutes outside Denver. The mountains provided a stunning backdrop, and the neighborhood seemed nice when my wife, Sarah, and I first moved in. But that was before I understood what the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association truly was. It was before I met Brenda, the HOA president who treated our little community like her personal fiefdom. "Daniel Richardson," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crisp winter air. I was standing in my garage, coffee in hand, having just finished clearing my driveway from the snowstorm that had hit us the night before. 8 inches of heavy, wet snow had blanketed everything, and I had spent the last hour and a half getting my property cleared. "Morning, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. My breath formed clouds in the cold air as I walked toward her. She clicked her pen with unnecessary force and made a show of examining her clipboard. "I am issuing you a formal citation for violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA bylaws. You failed to clear your driveway and walkways within the required 6-hour time frame following the cessation of snowfall." I blinked at her, certain I had misheard. "The snow stopped falling at midnight. It's 7 in the morning. That's 7 hours, and I just finished clearing everything." "Exactly my point," she said, her thin lips pressing into a satisfied line. "The snow stopped at 11:53 last night according to the National Weather Service. That means you had until 5:53 this morning to complete your snow removal. You are over an hour late." "You have got to be kidding me," I said, feeling heat rise in my chest despite the freezing temperature. "Nobody starts shoveling snow at midnight, Brenda. It's dangerous, it's dark, and it's unreasonable. The rules are the rules, Daniel. The fine is $250. You have 10 days to pay." She tore off a pink slip from her clipboard and held it out to me. I did not take it. "This is ridiculous. I have never been late clearing my snow before. I am out here at 6 in the morning taking care of it, and you are writing me a ticket for being an hour late based on some technicality." 1 hour and 7 minutes, she corrected. "And it is not a technicality. It is the law of this community. We have standards here, Daniel. If we let one person slide, everyone will think they can just ignore the rules." She thrust the paper at me again. I took it this time, crumpling it slightly in my grip. "You know what, Brenda? This is harassment. You have had it out for me ever since I painted my shutters. Your shutters were burgundy. The approved color is colonial red. There is a difference." "They are the same damn color," languaged Daniel. She made another note on her clipboard. "I will add a formal warning for aggressive behavior toward an HOA board member to your file." I watched her walk back to her Lexus, her heels somehow finding purchase on the icy driveway. She drove off without another word, leaving me standing there holding a $250 fine for the crime of sleeping during a snowstorm instead of immediately grabbing a shovel. Sarah came out of the house wrapped in her blue bathrobe, holding a second cup of coffee. "What did she want? She fined me for not shoveling fast enough," I said, showing her the pink slip. Sarah's eyes widened as she read it. "This is insane. We need to fight this." "Oh, I plan to," I said. "I plan to fight this very much." What I did not tell Sarah was that I had been building up 3 years of frustration with Brenda Wallace and her HOA board. The shutter incident had been just one of many. They had fined us for having our trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. They had sent us a warning letter because our grass was a 1/4 inch taller than regulation height during a drought when we were trying to conserve water. They had threatened legal action when Sarah put a small garden gnome near our mailbox because it violated the decorative items policy. But this snow fine was different. This crossed a line. I spent the rest of that day researching the HOA bylaws, reading through every tedious page of the covenant documents we had signed when we bought the house. The snow removal policy was indeed in there, buried in Section 12. But as I read more carefully, I found something interesting. The policy stated that driveways and walkways must be cleared within 6 hours of snowfall cessation, but it also included a clause that all common areas and roads must be maintained to the same standard. The HOA was responsible for plowing the neighborhood roads. I grabbed my phone and walked outside, documenting what I saw. The main roads through Meadowbrook Heights had been plowed, sure, but many of them were done poorly. There was still packed snow in several areas. The side streets had not been touched at all. And according to the timestamps on my photos, it was now 8:30 in the morning, well past the 6-hour deadline. If Brenda wanted to play by the rules, we would play by the rules. I drafted a formal complaint letter, citing the same bylaw she had used against me, and documenting every single road and common area that had not been properly cleared within the 6-hour window. I took photos, noted the times, and even included weather data showing exactly when the snow had stopped. Then I sent it via certified mail to the HOA board and kept copies of everything. 2 days later, I received a response. It was not an apology or an acknowledgement of their own violation. Instead, it was a letter stating that my complaint had been received and would be discussed at the next board meeting in 3 weeks. The letter also reminded me that my fine was still due 3 weeks. They expected me to wait 3 weeks while they sat around deciding whether their own failure to follow the rules mattered, but I had to pay my fine within 10 days. I paid the fine. I did not want to, but Sarah convinced me that letting it go to collections or having a lien placed on our house was not worth the principal. So I wrote a check for $250, sealed it in an envelope, and hand-delivered it to Brenda's house. She answered the door in a pink velour tracksuit, a glass of white wine in her hand, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. "Daniel," she said, taking the envelope with a smile, "I am glad you have decided to be reasonable." "I am paying under protest," I said. "And I expect my complaint about the road conditions to be taken seriously at the board meeting." "Of course," she said in a tone that made it clear she had no intention of taking it seriously. "We value all resident input." The next snowstorm hit 1 week later. This time it was a monster, nearly 14 inches overnight. I woke up at 5 in the morning, well before dawn, and started shoveling. My back ached, my fingers were numb even through my insulated gloves, but I was determined not to give Brenda any ammunition. I finished my driveway and walkway by 7:30. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting orange and pink light across the snow-covered neighborhood. I was exhausted but satisfied. That satisfaction lasted about 10 minutes. Brenda's Lexus appeared again, rolling slowly down the street like a shark circling prey. She stopped in front of my house and got out, clipboard in hand. "No," I said before she could even speak. "No way. I finished well within the time limit." "Your driveway is acceptable," she said, running her finger down her checklist. "However, you have violated Section 15, Paragraph 2. Snow removed from your property must not be deposited in a manner that obstructs common areas or neighboring properties." She pointed to the end of my driveway where I had piled the snow. It was a large pile, sure, but it was on my property, on the strip of grass between my driveway and the street. "That is on my property," I said, "but it extends past the property line markers," she countered. "See here." She gestured to a spot where the snow pile did indeed slightly overlap onto the edge of the street. This is a common area. You are obstructing it by maybe 6 inches. The bylaw does not specify a minimum obstruction distance. Any obstruction is a violation. She handed me another pink slip. Another $250 fine. You really should read the bylaws more carefully, Daniel. Something inside me snapped. I did not yell or curse. I just stood there in the cold morning air and made a decision. If Brenda wanted to weaponize every single rule in the HOA bylaws against me, then I would do the same to her. But I would do it better. I took the fine without argument, which seemed to disappoint her. She had probably been hoping for a confrontation she could document. Instead, I just nodded, took my pink slip and watched her drive away. Then I got to work. I spent the entire day documenting every single violation I could find in Meadowbrook Heights. I drove through every street with my camera, taking photos and notes. The Hendersons on Maple Drive had a decorative flag that was not on the approved list. The Martinez family on Oak Street had a basketball hoop that extended into the street beyond the permitted distance. 3 different houses had cars parked in their driveways facing the wrong direction, a violation of Section 8. 7 houses had not cleared their sidewalks adequately. 2 houses had holiday decorations still up even though we were past the January 15th deadline. I documented everything. Times, dates, measurements, photographs from multiple angles. I created a spreadsheet. I printed out the relevant bylaw sections and highlighted the violations. And then I sent all of it, every single page, to the HOA board with a formal complaint about each violation. Let them choke on their own rules. The response was immediate and not at all what I expected. Instead of acknowledging my complaints, I received a cease and desist letter from an attorney representing the HOA. The letter stated that I was engaging in harassment of the board and my neighbors, and that if I continued to file frivolous complaints, they would pursue legal action against me. Frivolous. They called my complaints frivolous when they were using the exact same bylaws that Brenda had been wielding against me like a weapon. I took the letter to my own attorney, a guy named Marcus Patel, who I had used when we bought the house. He read through everything, including my documentation, the fines I had received, and the HOA's cease and desist letter. "This is wild," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "The HOA is clearly selectively enforcing their rules. That is actually illegal in Colorado. HOAs have to enforce their rules uniformly and consistently. They cannot target specific residents while ignoring the same violations by others." "So what can I do?" I asked. "You can sue them for selective enforcement and harassment. You would probably win, honestly. But it is going to cost money and time. The alternative is to keep your head down and try to live with it." I thought about that for a moment. The idea of just accepting Brenda's tyranny made my stomach turn. But a lawsuit would be expensive and stressful, and there was no guarantee I would recover all my costs even if I won. "Let me think about it," I said. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I decided to attend and see if I could resolve things without lawyers getting more involved. Sarah came with me for moral support, and we arrived at the community center, where the HOA held their monthly meetings. The room was small and stuffy, with about 20 folding chairs set up facing a long table where the board members sat. Brenda was in the center, flanked by 4 other board members. I recognized 2 of them. Patricia Chen, who lived 3 streets over and always seemed nervous around Brenda, and Robert Jenkins, a retired accountant who took his role way too seriously. The meeting started with routine business. Budget reports, upcoming community events, a discussion about repainting the neighborhood entrance sign. Then they got to the complaints section. "We have received several complaints from Daniel Richardson," Brenda said, saying my name like it tasted bad, "regarding snow removal on common area roads and various other alleged violations throughout the community. The board has reviewed these complaints and found them to be without merit." I stood up. Without merit. I provided photographs and documentation showing that the HOA failed to meet the same 6-hour snow removal deadline that you fined me for missing by an hour. "Mr. Richardson," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "the standards for common area maintenance are different from individual property maintenance. We have contracted services that work on a different schedule." "That is not what the bylaw says," I countered. "Section 12 applies to all snow removal in the community. It does not make a distinction between private and common property." Robert Jenkins cleared his throat. "The board has discretion in interpreting the bylaws. Discretion is not the same as selective enforcement," I said. "You fined me twice for minor violations while ignoring the same or worse violations by dozens of other residents." "That is because the other residents are not filing harassing complaints against their neighbors," Brenda shot back. Her composure was slipping, color rising in her cheeks. "You have been nothing but a problem since you moved here, Daniel. The shutters, the gnome, your attitude. You clearly do not respect the rules of this community." "I respect rules that are applied fairly," I said. "What I do not respect is a power-hungry HOA president who uses her position to bully people she does not like." The room went silent. A few people gasped. Patricia Chen looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Brenda stood up, her hands flat on the table. "You are out of order. I am calling this meeting to a close. Everyone except board members needs to leave. Now." Sarah tugged on my arm. "Come on, let us go." We left, but I could hear raised voices continuing behind us even after we stepped outside. "That went well," Sarah said dryly once we were in the car. "I am done playing nice," I said. "I am calling Marcus tomorrow and starting the lawsuit." But before I could do that, another snowstorm hit. It was the third major storm in 2 weeks, and Coloradans were getting tired of winter. This one dumped another 10 inches overnight. I was ready. I had set an alarm and was outside shoveling at 5 in the morning, working by floodlight. I cleared my driveway, my walkway, and even my sidewalk. I measured the snow pile at the end of my driveway to make absolutely certain it did not extend beyond my property line. I took photos of everything with timestamps. By 6:30 I was done. I was cold, tired, and sore, but I was done. And I was well within the 6-hour window. I went inside, took a hot shower, and made breakfast. Sarah was still asleep. I sat at the kitchen table eating scrambled eggs and toast, feeling a small sense of victory. Brenda would have nothing to complain about this time, except the HOA still had not plowed the roads. By 8 in the morning, 2 hours past the deadline, the main roads through Meadowbrook Heights were still unplowed. The snow was getting packed down by the few cars that had ventured out, making it worse. I called the HOA emergency line, the number we were all given for urgent maintenance issues. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I left a message politely noting that the roads had not been plowed within the required time frame. By 10 in the morning, there was still no response and no plows. People were starting to get stuck. I watched from my window as a minivan slid sideways trying to navigate the intersection near my house. I called again. Voicemail again. By noon, I was furious. The hypocrisy was stunning. They would fine me for being an hour late, but they could not even get the roads plowed within 6 hours. That was when I remembered my tractor. I owned a John Deere 5075E, a utility tractor I had bought to maintain the small wooded lot behind my house. It was not huge, but it was solid and powerful, with a front loader attachment. I had used it for moving dirt, clearing brush, and general property maintenance. In winter, I usually put it in the garage and forgot about it, but it could absolutely block a road if I wanted it to. The idea formed slowly at first, but once it took root, I could not shake it. The HOA had one main plowed road that connected Meadowbrook Heights to the county highway. It was the only way in or out of the neighborhood that was usable during heavy snow. All the other streets fed into it. If someone wanted to block traffic in the entire subdivision, that would be the place to do it. I am not proud of what I did next, but I am not going to pretend I regret it either. I fired up my tractor, drove it out of my garage, and headed toward the main road. The tractor's big tires chewed through the snow easily. A few neighbors saw me and waved, probably thinking I was being a good Samaritan and helping clear snow. The main road, Meadowbrook Boulevard, was plowed but not well. There was still a layer of packed snow and ice. I drove my tractor right to the narrowest point of the road, where it passed between two large decorative stone pillars that marked the entrance to the neighborhood. Then, I parked it sideways across both lanes. The tractor completely blocked the road. Nothing was getting past unless it wanted to drive over the curb and through someone's yard, which was not happening with all this snow. I turned off the engine, pocketed the keys, and walked back home. It was a half-mile walk, and by the time I got back, my phone was ringing. It was a number I did not recognize. I answered. "Daniel Richardson," a man's voice said, speaking. "This is Officer Bradley Morrow with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. We have received reports that you have parked a tractor across Meadowbrook Boulevard, blocking traffic." "Is that correct?" "It is parked on a neighborhood road that the HOA has failed to maintain properly," I said. "The road should have been plowed hours ago according to the association's own bylaws. Since they have not fulfilled their obligations, I did not think they would mind." There was a pause. "Sir, you cannot block a road with a tractor. You need to move it immediately." "The HOA can tow it if they want," I said. "I am not moving it until they either refund my fines or properly plow the roads according to their own rules." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Richardson, I am going to come to your residence to discuss this in person. Please stay home." He hung up. I looked at Sarah, who had been listening to my end of the conversation with wide eyes. "Did you really block the road with your tractor?" she asked. "I really did." "Oh my God, Daniel. They pushed me to this," I said. "I am sick of the double standards. I am sick of Brenda. I am sick of all of it." Sarah did not argue with me, which was either a sign of support or a sign that she thought I had completely lost my mind and did not know how to respond. Officer Morrow arrived about 30 minutes later. He was in his 40s, professional but not unkind. We sat in my living room while he asked questions about what had happened. I explained everything. The fines, the selective enforcement, the HOA's failure to plow the roads on time. I showed him my documentation, the photos, the timestamps, the bylaw sections. I even showed him the 2 pink slips I had received. He listened to all of it, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his temples. "Look, Mr. Richardson," he said, "I get it. HOAs can be a nightmare. My brother dealt with something similar in his neighborhood. But you cannot block public roads because you are upset with your HOA. "It is not a public road," I said. "It is a private road owned and maintained by the HOA." "That is a technicality," he said. "Technicalities seem to matter a lot around here," I replied. Officer Morrow almost smiled at that but caught himself. "Here is the situation. You have 2 options. You can move the tractor voluntarily right now, and we will treat this as a civil dispute between you and the HOA. Or you can refuse, in which case I will have to arrest you for obstruction, and the county will have the tractor towed at your expense. What if I move it but file charges against the HOA for harassment and selective enforcement? You can do that regardless, he said, but that is a civil matter. You would need to talk to a lawyer and probably go through the courts. What you cannot do is take the law into your own hands by blocking roads. I considered my options. Getting arrested would not help my case. It would just give Brenda more ammunition. And a towing bill for the tractor would be expensive. Fine, I said. I will move it. Thank you, Officer Morrow said, standing up. For what it is worth, you should talk to a lawyer about the HOA issues. What you have described sounds like selective enforcement, and that is actionable in Colorado. I drove back to the tractor with Officer Morrow following in his patrol car. A small crowd had gathered near the blocked road, including Brenda, who was standing next to her Lexus looking absolutely livid. "It is about time," she shouted as I approached. "This is outrageous. I am filing criminal charges. I am filing a lawsuit. You are going to be removed from this community." Officer Morrow held up a hand. "Madam, please calm down. Mr. Richardson is moving the tractor now. The situation is being resolved." "Resolved?" Brenda shrieked. "He blocked the only road out of the neighborhood. People could not get to work. There could have been an emergency." "Then maybe the HOA should have plowed the roads on time like the bylaws require," I said, climbing onto the tractor. "That is completely different." "How is it different, Brenda?" I started the tractor, the engine rumbling to life. "You fine me for being an hour late shoveling my driveway." "The roads were 6 hours late getting plowed. Why is one a violation worth $250 and the other is no big deal?" She did not have an answer for that. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. I moved the tractor off the road and parked it on the side, then walked back to where Officer Morrow was standing. "Am I free to go?" I asked. "You are," he said. "But seriously, get a lawyer. This is not going to get better on its own." He was right about that. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. Brenda sent me a letter stating that the HOA board was considering starting eviction proceedings against me for harassment and dangerous behavior. I received another cease and desist letter from their attorney. Someone spray painted the word "jerk" on my mailbox, which I was pretty sure was the work of Brenda's adult son who still lived with her. But I also started getting support from other neighbors. It turned out I was not the only one who had been dealing with Brenda's tyranny. The Martinez family had been fined for having their trash cans out too long. The Hendersons had been cited for their flag. Even Patricia Chen, the board member, quietly told me that she had been trying to get Brenda to ease up for months, but was always outvoted. A group of about 15 homeowners came to me asking if they could join any legal action I took against the HOA. They all had similar stories of petty fines, selective enforcement, and harassment. I called Marcus Patel and told him about the growing group of dissatisfied residents. He sounded excited. "This is good," he said. "A class action lawsuit would have a lot more weight, and if we can show a pattern of selective enforcement affecting multiple residents, that strengthens the case significantly." We organized a meeting at a local coffee shop, away from HOA property. 23 people showed up, all with complaints about Brenda and the board. We spent 2 hours sharing stories, comparing fines and documenting the pattern of abuse. Marcus laid out a plan. We would file a lawsuit against the Meadowbrook Heights HOA for selective enforcement, harassment, and violations of Colorado's HOA statutes. We would demand a full audit of the HOA's finances. a review of all fines issued in the past 3 years, and the removal of Brenda Wallace from the board. Everyone agreed. We pooled money for the legal fees and Marcus got to work. The lawsuit was filed on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Brenda was calling an emergency board meeting. By Tuesday, we received a response from the HOA's attorney stating that our claims were baseless and that they would fight the lawsuit vigorously. But cracks were starting to show. Robert Jenkins, the board member who had been so supportive of Brenda during the meeting I attended, quietly resigned from the board. Patricia Chen became more vocal about her concerns. 2 other board members started distancing themselves from Brenda. The community was divided. Some people thought I was a hero for standing up to the HOA. Others thought I was a troublemaker who should just follow the rules. One neighbor told me I was ruining property values by creating drama. Another neighbor brought me a case of beer and thanked me for having the courage to fight back. As the lawsuit progressed, Marcus subpoenaed HOA records. What he found was stunning. The HOA had been selectively enforcing rules for years, but it was worse than we thought. Brenda and her close friends were essentially immune from fines. Brenda herself had multiple violations on her property that had never been cited, including a shed that was built without proper approval and a tree that extended over the property line into common area. Her best friend, a woman named Susan who lived 2 doors down from her, had 5 documented violations that were never addressed. But residents who Brenda did not like, or who had ever questioned her authority, were scrutinized constantly and fined for minor infractions. The financial records were even more damning. The HOA had been paying Brenda's son, Derek, to do landscaping work in the common areas. But when Marcus Cross referenced the payments with actual work done, it became clear that Derek was being paid for far more hours than he actually worked. In some months, he was being paid for 40 hours a week, when the landscaping clearly only required 10 hours at most. It was essentially embezzlement. Brenda was funneling HOA funds to her son through fraudulent invoices. Marcus brought this to the attention of the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. They opened an investigation. Things moved quickly after that. The DA's office subpoenaed additional records, interviewed board members, and looked into the HOA's finances going back 5 years. What they found was systematic fraud. Brenda had been stealing from the HOA for years, using her position to enrich herself and her family while ruling the community with an iron fist. The board held another emergency meeting and voted to remove Brenda as president. She showed up at the meeting and screamed at everyone, threatening lawsuits and claiming she had done nothing wrong. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even her most loyal supporters had abandoned her. 2 weeks later, Brenda Wallace was arrested. I was not there to see it, but several neighbors witnessed sheriff's deputies arriving at her house early in the morning. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Her son Derek was also arrested as an accomplice. The charges were serious. Brenda had stolen over $70,000 from the HOA over 5 years. Some of that money had come directly from our HOA dues. Money that was supposed to go toward maintaining the community had instead gone into Brenda's pocket. The lawsuit we had filed became almost unnecessary. With Brenda gone and facing criminal charges, the new board president, a reasonable guy named Tom Fletcher who lived on Cedar Street, reached out to us with a settlement offer. The HOA would refund all fines that had been issued in the past 3 years that were determined to be part of the selective enforcement pattern. They would revise the bylaws to make them more reasonable and add an appeals process for fines. They would commit to uniform enforcement of all rules. and they would issue a formal apology to all affected residents. It was not everything we wanted, but it was close. After discussion with the group, we agreed to the settlement. I got my $500 back, plus legal fees. But more importantly, the community was free from Brenda's tyranny. Brenda's criminal case moved through the courts over the next several months. She tried to fight the charges, claiming that her son's landscaping payments were legitimate and that any mistakes were just accounting errors. But the evidence was too strong. Her own records showed inflated hours and work that was never performed. She eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges of theft and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She was also ordered to pay back the full amount stolen, plus penalties. Her son Derek got a lighter sentence, 2 years probation and community service, since prosecutors determined he had mostly been following his mother's instructions. Life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was fair and reasonable. They still enforced the bylaws, but they did it consistently and with common sense. If someone was late shoveling their snow, they got a friendly reminder, not an immediate fine. If someone's grass was a little tall during a drought, they were given the benefit of the doubt. Tom Fletcher, the new president, even came to my house to personally apologize for everything that had happened. Brenda was out of control for years, he said. A lot of us knew it, but did not have the courage to stand up to her. Thank you for doing what needed to be done. Sarah and I stayed in Meadowbrook Heights. We considered moving after everything that happened, but we loved our house, and the neighborhood itself was actually nice once the toxic leadership was gone. The tractor incident became legendary in the community. People still joked about it at neighborhood barbecues. "Do not make Daniel angry or he will block the road again," someone would say, and everyone would laugh. I never did block the road again. I did not need to. The HOA learned its lesson about abusing power and selectively enforcing rules. One funny postscript to the whole story. About 6 months after Brenda was sentenced, I was outside working in my yard when a moving truck pulled up to her old house. A young couple was moving in, probably first-time homebuyers excited about their new place. I walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "I am Daniel. I live 3 doors down." "Thanks," the husband said. "I am Kevin. This is my wife, Lisa. We are so excited to be here. The HOA president, Tom Fletcher, seems really nice. He gave us a welcome packet and everything." "Tom is great," I said. "Things around here are pretty good now." "Now?" Lisa asked. "Was there a problem before?" I smiled. "Let me tell you a story about the previous HOA president and a tractor." We sat on their front porch and I told them the whole saga. They listened with increasing disbelief, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of shock. When I finished, Kevin shook his head. "That is absolutely insane. I cannot believe someone would be that power-hungry over an HOA." "Believe it," I said, "but that is all in the past now. You picked a good time to move in. The community is really nice now that we have reasonable people running things." As I walked back to my house, I thought about everything that had happened. The fines, the harassment, the tractor, the lawsuit, the arrests. It had been exhausting and stressful, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes standing up to bullies requires doing something dramatic. Sometimes you have to park a tractor across a road to make people pay attention. Sometimes you have to fight back even when it is easier to just pay the fine and keep your head down. I am not saying I would recommend my approach to everyone. Getting arrested was a real possibility, and if Officer Morrow had been less understanding, things could have gone very differently. But in the end, it worked out. Brenda Wallace learned that she could not rule a community through fear and selective enforcement. The other residents learned that they had power when they stood together. And I learned that sometimes the best response to petty tyranny is to be just a little bit crazy. My tractor is still in the garage, ready to go if I ever need it. But these days, I mostly use it for moving firewood and maintaining the trails on my back lot. The HOA does not give me any trouble anymore. They plow the roads on time, they enforce rules fairly, and they do not try to fine people for being an hour late with a snow shovel. Life is peaceful now. Boring, even. And after everything I went through, boring is exactly what I want. I still see Patricia Chen around the neighborhood sometimes. She stayed on the HOA board and has been instrumental in reforming the organization. We always wave to each other, and once in a while we will stop and chat about how much better things are now. "You know," she said to me one day while we were both getting our mail, "I wanted to stand up to Brenda for years. I just did not know how. Watching you do it, even though it seemed crazy at the time, it gave me courage. So thank you." "You were one of the ones who actually made the changes happen," I said. "I just made a scene. You did the real work," she smiled. "Maybe we both did what needed to be done." I think she was right. The community is better now. People are friendlier, less stressed, less worried about getting fined for trivial things. The neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties actually feel fun instead of being dominated by HOA drama and Brenda's latest power play. Tom Fletcher has been a great president. He is organized and efficient, but he also understands that the HOA exists to serve the community, not to rule over it. When issues come up, he listens to residents and tries to find reasonable solutions. It is refreshing. As for Brenda, I do not know much about what happened to her after she went to prison. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was released after serving 14 months, getting out slightly early for good behavior. She moved to another state to live with her sister. Her ex-husband, who had divorced her years before all this happened, apparently refused to take her in. Derek, her son, stayed in Colorado but moved to a different town. I saw him once at a hardware store in Denver. We made eye contact, and he quickly looked away and went down a different aisle. I felt a little bad for him. He had made mistakes, but he had also been manipulated by his mother. The house Brenda used to live in sold quickly after she went to prison. Kevin and Lisa, the young couple who bought it, turned out to be great neighbors. They have a little girl now, and sometimes I see them playing in their yard. It is nice to see that house filled with happiness instead of Brenda's bitterness. I never did use my tractor for anything dramatic again, but it remains a symbol in the neighborhood. At the last HOA meeting I attended, someone suggested putting up a historical marker at the spot where I had blocked the road. "We could call it the Great Tractor Rebellion of 2026, someone joked, and the whole room laughed. Tom Fletcher pretended to consider it seriously. "I think we would need a bylaw amendment for that," he said with a straight face. "And given our history with bylaws, maybe we should just let this one go." More laughter. The fact that we could joke about it showed how far we had come. Sarah and I celebrated our 8th anniversary last month. We had dinner at a nice restaurant in Denver and talked about everything that had happened over the years. The HOA drama, the lawsuit, the community coming together. "You regret blocking the road with the tractor?" she asked me over dessert. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "I mean, it was impulsive and maybe not the smartest thing I have ever done. But it worked. It got people's attention. It made them realize that Brenda could not just do whatever she wanted without consequences." "You could have been arrested," Sarah pointed out. "I know. And if I had to do it over, maybe I would find a different way. But I do not regret standing up to her. Someone had to." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. I am proud of you. Even when you were being crazy, I was proud of you. That meant a lot to me. Sarah had supported me through the whole ordeal, even when she thought I was going too far. She had stood by me during the lawsuit, during the stress, during all of it. We drove home that night through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook Heights. The streetlights cast a warm glow on the snow-lined roads. Everything was peaceful, orderly, normal, and that normalcy, that peace, was something we had fought for and won. I parked in our driveway and we went inside. The house was warm and welcoming. We had made it ours over the years, despite the HOA's best efforts to control everything. The burgundy shutters that had caused so much drama still looked great. Sarah's garden gnome was back by the mailbox. We had painted the front door a shade of blue that probably was not on the approved color list, but nobody had said anything because the new HOA board had better things to worry about. This was our home, our community. And it was finally free from the petty tyranny that had made life miserable for so many people. As I got ready for bed that night, I looked out the window at my garage where the tractor sat. In the dim light, I could just make out its shape. It looked almost noble, like a retired war horse put out to pasture. "Thank you," I whispered to it, feeling only slightly ridiculous for talking to a piece of farm equipment. "You did good." Sarah called from the bedroom, asking if I was coming to bed. I closed the curtain and headed that way, ready to sleep peacefully in a home that finally felt like it was truly ours, in a neighborhood that had learned what happens when power goes unchecked. The snow fell gently outside, and for once, I did not worry about when I would shovel it. I would get to it when I got to it, and the HOA would not say a word. That alone was worth everything we had been through. The following spring, the neighborhood held its annual meeting to elect new board members and discuss upcoming projects. I did not run for the board myself, having had quite enough of HOA politics, but I attended the meeting to support the candidates I thought would do a good job. The turnout was impressive. After everything that had happened with Brenda, people were more engaged with the HOA than ever before. They understood now that paying attention mattered, that who ran the organization made a huge difference in their daily lives. Tom Fletcher was re-elected as president by a wide margin. Patricia Chen was re-elected to her position. Several new members joined the board, all of them reasonable people who had been vetted by the community. During the meeting, Tom presented the new bylaws that had been drafted. They were clearer, more reasonable, and included provisions for appeals and due process. There were also strict limits on fines and requirements for warnings before citations were issued. The goal of these new bylaws, Tom explained to the assembled residents, is to create a community where people want to live, not a community where people are afraid to step outside their houses for fear of being fined. We are here to maintain property values and common areas, not to micromanage everyone's lives. The bylaws were approved unanimously. At the end of the meeting, Tom asked if anyone had any other business to discuss. An elderly man I did not know very well stood up. His name was George, and he lived on the far side of the neighborhood. "I just want to say," George began, his voice shaking slightly, "that I am grateful for what Daniel Richardson did last winter. I know it seemed crazy at the time, but it needed to happen. Brenda Wallace made my life hell for 3 years. She fined me constantly, harassed me, made me feel unwelcome in my own home. I was actually considering selling my house and moving just to get away from her, but Daniel stood up to her and it changed everything. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having the courage to do what the rest of us were too scared to do." The room broke into applause. I felt my face get hot with embarrassment, but I also felt proud. What George said mattered to me more than any legal victory or refunded fine. After the meeting, several people came up to shake my hand and thank me. Some shared their own stories of dealing with Brenda. Others just wanted to express their appreciation for how much better the community was now. One woman, an older lady named Margaret who lived on Elm Street, pressed a tin of homemade cookies into my hands. "For you and Sarah," she said. "Thank you for making this a neighborhood again instead of a dictatorship." Sarah and I walked home that evening holding hands, the cookie tins swinging between us. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Birds were singing in the trees. Kids were playing basketball in a driveway down the street. It was a normal, peaceful suburban evening. The kind of evening we had hoped for when we first moved to Meadowbrook Heights, and now, finally, we had it. "You know what the funny thing is?" Sarah said as we reached our house. "What?" Brenda thought she was making the community better with all her rules and fines. She thought she was maintaining standards and property values. But really, she was making everyone miserable and turning neighbors against each other. Now that she is gone and we have reasonable leadership, the community actually is better. Property values are up because people want to live here again. The neighborhood looks nicer because people are taking pride in their homes instead of just trying to avoid fines. She was right. I had noticed the same thing. More people were out walking their dogs, chatting with neighbors, working on their yards. There was a sense of community that had been missing before. It is almost like treating people with respect and giving them the benefit of the doubt works better than ruling through fear and punishment, I said. "What a concept," Sarah replied with a laugh. We went inside and had cookies for dessert, even though we had just eaten dinner. They were delicious, chocolate chip with walnuts. Life went on. Summer came, and with it neighborhood barbecues and pool parties at the community center. Kids sold lemonade on street corners. The 4th of July block party was the biggest and best the neighborhood had ever had. I ran into Officer Morrow one day at a grocery store in town. He recognized me and came over. "I heard about everything that happened with your HOA," he said. "The arrests, the lawsuit, all of it. Pretty wild." "It was quite a ride," I agreed. "You know, when I showed up that day you had blocked the road with your tractor. I thought you were just another angry guy having a meltdown. But you actually had legitimate grievances. You were right about the selective enforcement." "I appreciate you being understanding that day," I said. "You could have arrested me, and you would have been within your rights, but you gave me a chance to fix it. Sometimes police work is about de-escalating situations instead of throwing the book at people," he said. "I could tell you were not a bad guy, just someone who had been pushed too far." I am glad it worked out. We chatted for a few more minutes before going our separate ways. That brief conversation meant a lot to me. It was validation that I had not been crazy, that my grievances had been real and justified. As fall approached and another winter loomed, I found myself actually looking forward to snow season. Not because I enjoyed shoveling, but because I knew that this year would be different. There would be no Brenda showing up with her clipboard and her petty fines. No harassment, no selective enforcement, no drama, just snow. White, cold, beautiful snow that I would clear from my driveway on my own schedule within reason, like a normal person. The first significant snowfall of the new winter came in early November. About 6 inches overnight, enough to require clearing but not a major storm. I got up at a reasonable hour, had my coffee, and went outside to shovel. It took me about an hour. I cleared my driveway, my walkway, and helped my elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson with her driveway too. She was 83 and could not handle a snow shovel anymore. No one came to measure my snow pile. No one timed how long it took me. No one issued me a citation. The HOA's contracted plow service cleared the roads properly and on time. By mid-morning, Meadowbrook Boulevard was perfectly clear and safe to drive on. It was glorious in its ordinariness. That evening, I was sitting in my living room reading a book when Sarah came in with her laptop. "You are not going to believe this," she said, turning the screen to show me. It was a news article from a local Denver news site. The headline read, "Former HOA President Sentenced to Prison for Embezzlement Speaks Out." I read the article. Brenda had given an interview from prison, her first public statement since being sentenced. In it, she claimed she was the victim of a conspiracy, that I had orchestrated everything to get revenge for my fines, and that the charges against her were exaggerated. "The neighborhood turned on me," she was quoted as saying. "I dedicated years of my life to maintaining standards and keeping property values high. I made difficult decisions and enforced rules that other people did not have the courage to enforce, and this is how I was repaid." There was no mention of the $70,000 she had stolen. No acknowledgement of the selective enforcement or harassment, no acceptance of responsibility for anything. "Wow," I said, handing the laptop back to Sarah. "She really learned nothing." "Some people never do," Sarah said. "They are always the victim in their own story." I thought about responding, maybe contacting the news site to give my side of the story. But then I decided against it. Brenda was in prison. She had been held accountable. The community had moved on. There was no point in prolonging the drama. "Let it go," I said. "She can tell herself whatever story she wants. We know the truth." And that was enough. The rest of that winter passed uneventfully. Snow fell, we shoveled, the HOA plowed the roads, life continued. It was boring and predictable and absolutely perfect. In the spring, Tom Fletcher announced that he would be stepping down as HOA president. He and his family were relocating to Oregon for his job. The news was met with sadness, but also understanding. Tom had done an incredible job rebuilding trust and creating a functional, fair HOA. Elections were held. Patricia Chen ran for president and won easily. She appointed new board members who shared her vision of reasonable, consistent leadership. The transition was smooth. At Patricia's first meeting as president, she proposed something unexpected. She wanted to create a scholarship fund using HOA money that had been recovered from Brenda. The money would be available to neighborhood kids to help with college expenses. "Brenda stole this money from all of us," Patricia explained. "We got it back through the legal system. But instead of just putting it back into the general fund for landscaping or street repairs, what if we used it for something meaningful? Something that would benefit the community for years to come?" The proposal was approved unanimously. The Meadowbrook Heights Scholarship Fund was established with the recovered money as its foundation. Residents could contribute additional funds if they wanted. The first scholarships would be awarded the following year. It was a perfect example of turning something negative into something positive. Money that had been stolen through greed and corruption would now help kids get an education. I donated to the scholarship fund. So did most of our neighbors. By the time the first scholarships were awarded, the fund had grown significantly. 2 high school seniors from the neighborhood received scholarships that year. One was Kevin and Lisa's nephew, who was living with them while attending a local high school. The other was the daughter of a single mother who lived on Pine Street. At the ceremony where the scholarships were presented, Patricia gave a short speech. "This scholarship fund exists because of a dark chapter in our neighborhood's history," she said. "But it also exists because our community came together, stood up for what was right, and demanded accountability. These scholarships are a reminder that even when things seem bad, people working together can create positive change. We are proud to support these students as they pursue their dreams." There was not a dry eye in the room. As I sat there watching those kids receive their scholarship checks, I thought about everything that had happened. The snow fines, the tractor, the lawsuit, the arrests, the reforms. It had all led to this moment, to something genuinely good coming out of something that had started so negatively. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "Worth it?" "Absolutely," I whispered back, and it was. Years have passed now since the great tractor incident, as it is still sometimes called. My tractor is older, showing signs of wear but still running strong. The neighborhood is thriving. Property values have increased steadily. People are happy. Brenda Wallace was released from prison and moved away. I heard she tried to join her new community's HOA board, but was rejected when they learned about her history. Some lessons, apparently, she still has not learned. Derek got his life together from what I hear. He moved to California, went back to school, and is working in legitimate landscaping now. I hope he is doing well. As for me, I am still living in Meadowbrook Heights with Sarah. We have no plans to move. This is our home, our community. We fought for it, and now we get to enjoy it. The HOA is well run and fair. Rules are enforced consistently. Disputes are handled reasonably. It is everything an HOA should be, and everything ours was not when Brenda was in charge. I still see my tractor every time I pull into the garage. Sometimes I pat it on the way past, a small acknowledgement of the role it played in changing our community. It is just a machine, a tool, but it became a symbol of standing up to tyranny, and sometimes symbols matter. Sometimes blocking a road with a tractor is exactly what needs to happen to wake people up, to make them realize that they have power, that they do not have to accept abuse from people in authority. I do not recommend my approach for everyone. It was risky, possibly illegal, and could have gone very wrong. But in my specific situation, with my specific HOA and my specific tyrant of an HOA president, it worked. The important lesson is not that everyone should park tractors across roads. The lesson is that standing up to bullies matters. Speaking out against unfair treatment matters. Holding people in power accountable matters. Whether you do that with a tractor or a lawsuit or just by showing up to board meetings and asking tough questions, what matters is that you do something. Silence and compliance in the face of abuse only encourages more abuse. Our community learned that lesson, and we are all better for it. So if you are dealing with an out-of-control HOA, an abusive board president, or any situation where someone in power is treating you unfairly, know that you are not alone. Know that you have options. Know that change is possible. You might not need a tractor, but you definitely need courage. And sometimes, that courage pays off in ways you never imagined.